I'm so sorry. I know it's probably not me, but also maybe it is me. Every time we go on holiday break, just craziness happens in the world. But with this being the first Philip DeFranco show of 2026, we are now officially on our everyday grind. I will see you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and starting next week, Friday. We have a lot to dive into and break down, starting with this. Donald Trump attacked Venezuela, captured Maduro, and now wants American companies to take back the oil that he says was stolen from them. But even if Trump's finally being honest about what he's really after, he's still not telling the whole truth. All while, the way that he's talking, it looks like this is just the start of a new era of American adventurism abroad. Now, of course, you know, especially if you watched a show last year, this isn't coming out of nowhere. There's been a lot of building up to this moment, where the Pentagon amassed troops, aircraft, and warships in the Caribbean. U.S. attacks killed at least 115 people on boats that the administration claimed without providing evidence were transporting drugs. And at the end of last month, it actually carried out a drone strike on a port facility in Venezuela itself. And it turns out all the while there was a CIA team spending months in the country undetected, gathering intelligence about Maduro's movements. And that including help from a source in Maduro's government, and all of that leading to 10:30 p.m. last Friday when Trump reportedly gave final approval for Mar-a-Lago for a mission. A mission where more than 150 military aircraft, including drones, fighter planes, and bombers, took off from 20 different military bases and Navy ships. With them then, early Saturday morning, striking at radar and air defense batteries across Caracas, clearing the way for helicopters that carried Delta Force commandos right to Maduro's doorstep. And all of this, it went crazy fast. About 5 minutes after entering the building, they reported that they had Maduro and his wife in custody. And then by 4:29 a.m. local time, the pair were transferred to the USS Iwo Jima, which is an American warship that had been stationed about 100 miles off the coast of Venezuela. And this whole operation reportedly took just 2 hours and 20 minutes, killing at least 80 people, including civilians and soldiers, according to a Venezuelan official. Right, and as far as Maduro, he's now being held in New York City, and he pled not guilty today to federal charges, including narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and possession of machine guns and destructive devices, saying, "I am innocent, I am a decent man, I am president." And with that, you've got the updated and unsealed indictment alleging that he headed a corrupt, illegitimate government that for decades has leveraged government power to protect and promote illegal activity, including drug trafficking. And this indictment also charges Maduro's wife, his son, 2 other high-ranking Venezuelan officials, and an alleged leader of Tren de Aragua. Right, that gang that the Trump administration designated as a terrorist organization last year, and that Trump has also claimed worked hand in hand with Maduro's government, although notably, U.S. intelligence agencies have said otherwise. Right, there is reportedly evidence that Maduro has benefited from the drug trade to stay in power, including by using profits from drug trafficking to secure the loyalty of military officials and leaders in his party. But experts have said there's little evidence that Maduro or Venezuela had a role in the drug trade that directly contributed to overdose deaths in the United States. Right, fentanyl, which Donald Trump is always talking about, it's almost entirely produced in Mexico using chemicals from China, and Venezuela really plays no role in its trade. In fact, if you actually look into it, when you compare, Venezuela is not considered a major drug producer at all, or with experts often calling it a minor cocaine transit country, with most of the cocaine also flowing through it, heading to Europe, not the United States. So one of the big things with that, what it points to, is that this was really never about drugs. And I think we always kind of knew that. And even Trump, he's barely held up that charade. Right, Trump has made it very clear that his primary interest is oil.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. We're going to be taking out a tremendous amount of wealth out of the ground, and that wealth is going to the people of Venezuela and people from outside of Venezuela that used to be in Venezuela. And it goes also to the United States of America.
So then with that, among the reactions, you had the likes of Democratic Senator Chris Murphy saying,
The message that they sent was that this wasn't about regime change. I mean, they came to Congress and they literally lied to our face. They said, this is just a counter-narcotics operation. This seems to be mostly about oil and natural resources. Donald Trump's entire foreign policy is corrupt. Russia, the Middle East, and now Venezuela is all about making money for his friends. And Wall Street, the oil industry, they can make a lot of money off of Venezuela if they run it. You saw within hours of the invasion the announcement of a group of Wall Street investors, energy industry investors, planning a trip to Venezuela to make money off of this invasion, off of this ouster.
But that said, you know, if there is an America First play or argument to all this, it's that the U.S. is only taking back what rightfully belongs to it, which is a claim that Trump has repeatedly made over and over, that Venezuela stole America's oil. But to be very clear here, U.S. companies never owned oil or land in Venezuela, and officials didn't kick them out of the country. And that's why you're seeing things like a Venezuelan economist at the University of Denver saying Trump's claim that Venezuela has stolen oil and land from the U.S. is baseless. But of course, that claim does come from somewhere, and we should talk about about it. Going way back, there was a military dictator who ruled Venezuela from 1908 until 1935, granting concessions that left 3 foreign oil companies in control and 98% of the Venezuelan market. And the country became the world's second largest oil producer and largest exporter. Then we jumped to 1976, and the Venezuelan government took control of the country's petroleum industry, nationalizing hundreds of private businesses and foreign-owned assets, including projects operated by the American companies Exxon and Mobil. And overall, American oil companies lost roughly $5 billion in assets, but were compensated just $1 billion each. And then they took even greater losses in 2007 when President Hugo Chavez nationalized some of the last privately run oil operations in the country. Major American companies, with the exception of Chevron, which is the only U.S. oil company operating in Venezuela today, they refused to accept the terms offered to them. And in that case, the companies later actually won billions of dollars from Venezuela in international arbitration, technically, because the country has yet to actually pay those full amounts. So now you've got Trump and his administration reportedly telling oil execs in recent weeks that if they want compensation for seized property, then they got to go back to Venezuela now and invest heavily. You know, the potential upside there, it's huge. Venezuela is known to have the largest proven crude oil reserve in the world. And very notably, the country produces the kind of heavy crude oil that's needed for diesel fuel, asphalt, and other fuels for heavy equipment. But even with its massive reserves, it's been producing less than 1% of the world's crude oil supply, way less than a few decades ago, thanks to corruption, mismanagement, and U.S. sanctions. So, you know, there's been a lot of hesitancy to get involved. For example, one industry official telling Politico, the infrastructure currently there is so dilapidated that no one at these companies can adequately assess what is needed to make it operable. And another expert saying, the issue is not just that the infrastructure is in bad shape, but it's mostly about how do you get foreign companies to start pouring money in before they have a clear perspective on the political stability, the contract situation, and the like. And on that note, we're not really getting a whole lot of clarity from the White House. You had Trump saying at a news conference after the attack that the U.S. would run the country until a safe, proper, and judicious transition of power could be arranged. A statement that pretty much freaked everyone the hell out. And Trump, he didn't say whether U.S. forces would occupy the country, but he did say he wasn't afraid of boots on the ground. With that, I'll say right now there are no signs of a continued U.S. military presence in Venezuela, and Maduro's government is still in power. In fact, his vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, she's been sworn in as interim president. And you had her saying in a national address on Saturday that the U.S. had invaded her country under false pretenses and insisted that Maduro is still Venezuela's rightful leader. So there you had some speculating that might be more politics than a genuine display of loyalty. U.S. officials reportedly settled on Rodriguez as an acceptable candidate to replace Maduro weeks ago, with Trump even saying at the news conference that Marco Rubio had spoken to Rodriguez and determined that she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. And that is, he said that the country's exiled opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, didn't have the support or respect to lead the country. And that being said, surprised a lot of people for a lot of reasons, including, international observers said that the candidate that she supported after being disqualified beat Maduro in the 2024 election by a wide margin. In fact, the Biden administration and the second Trump administration both recognized that candidate as the legitimate winner. And since then, Machado has openly supported the U.S. military campaign in the Caribbean and gone out of her way to appeal to Trump, calling him a champion of freedom, echoing his talking points on election fraud and even dedicating her Nobel Peace Prize to him. All of that, it appears it may have been for nothing, especially because you now have Rodriguez striking a more diplomatic tone, saying that she's willing to work with Trump. Though that also notably coming as you had Trump warning in an interview, if Rodriguez doesn't do what's right, she is going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro, with Trump then also claiming again last night that the United States was in charge of Venezuela. And then when asked what he needed from Rodriguez, he replied, "We need total access. We need access to the oil and to other things in their country that allow us to rebuild their country." But then with that, you had Rubio, some saying walking back, some saying explained the administration's plan, saying that it's to keep a military quarantine in place of the country's oil exports, preventing oil tankers on a U.S. sanctions list from entering and leaving the country. And the Venezuelan government would likely have to open up the state-controlled oil industry to foreign investment, likely giving priority to American companies in order for the quarantine to end. But, for now, there's a lot of unknowns, right? What will the continued response be from Venezuelans, both in the country and abroad? Or while you had a lot of people celebrating the end of Maduro, you have a lot of people going, well, isn't this the same regime? Though also it's going to take time to see how stable and how compliant the Venezuelan government's going to actually be, and if it'll be enough to reassure U.S. companies. Also, in the meantime, you have many asking, well, what are the international reactions here? What are the potential ramifications that go beyond just Venezuela? Well, there you've had France, Germany, Mexico, Brazil, China, Russia, Chile, and Colombia condemning Trump's abduction of Maduro. But you also had people like Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, making some points that we've heard from a lot of people, saying that efforts by the U.S. to prove it's no longer a colonial power in the Americas has been all thrown out now, saying that Trump's actions could potentially turn the whole region against us, right? And then also arguing that the administration's aim of dominating the Western Hemisphere, including forcibly seizing leaders in the region, could spur China and Russia to try to do the same in their perceived spheres of influence, right? Saying there's an extraordinarily high risk that adversaries around the world will use the same theory of the case case to act with further impunity. Right? And that's an interesting case to hear out, especially because you have Team Trump suggesting that Venezuela may be only the first country on this side of the globe that he takes action against. In fact, just in the couple of days following the operation in Venezuela, Team Trump has pointed to several countries as the possible next target, including Greenland, Colombia, and even Mexico. Right? Trump again reigniting his previous threats to annex Greenland, despite all the pushback he received from Greenland itself and Denmark the first time he brought it up. And with that, you had Trump telling reporters on Air Force One on Sunday,
"We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russia and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you."
Trump also reiterating that to The Atlantic, saying that the US absolutely needs Greenland for national security. And it seems very much to be in the mind of those in Trump's orbit, including Stephen Miller's wife, who posted soon with the image of an American flag draped across a map of Greenland. And so with all this, you had the leaders in Denmark and Greenland just not happy. The Prime Minister of Denmark, Mette Frederiksen, noting again that the US has no right to annex Greenland, also whose people made it very clear that it's not for sale. All while, I think a lot of people don't realize this, the US already has wide access to Greenland because of a NATO defense agreement. And so among other things, Trump's national security argument really doesn't appear to hold water. And with that, you had Frederiksen adding, "I strongly urge the United States to stop the threats against a historically close ally." With Greenland's prime minister also echoing that, but then also adding, "When the president of the United States talks about we need Greenland and connects us with Venezuela and military intervention, it's not just wrong, this is so disrespectful." And this has gotten to such a crazy place that Denmark and Germany have had to promise to defend Greenland against any invasion. But of course, it's not where it ends for Trump, because there's also Colombia, with Trump taking aim at President Gustavo Petro. Trump saying he better, quote, "watch his ass," and calling him a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. So with that, promising he's not going to be doing it for very long. And Trump, he's had beef with Petro for a while. He's placed sanctions on him, his family, and a member of his government back in October. He also slashed U.S. assistance to Colombia after adding them to a list of countries that had failed to cooperate with the war on drugs. And actually, when asked if the U.S. would carry out an operation on Colombia similar to what was done in Venezuela, Trump responded, "It sounds good to me." Though again, that is not where it ends, because we have to talk about Cuba, with Trump telling reporters, "I think Cuba is going to be something we'll end up talking about because Cuba is a failing nation right now." And there, specifically, he said that Cuba's economy, which in part has already been struggling thanks to a years-long embargo from the U.S., is only going to get worse now that Maduro is out of the picture. Because Maduro provided Cuba with subsidized oil in exchange for Cuban security, helping him maintain power. But you also had Trump saying to Fox News that he doesn't think that the U.S. will need to take action in Cuba because, quote, "I think it's just going to fall. It's going down for the count." Though, I will say that it stopped Secretary of State Marco Rubio, whose parents fled from Cuba, from saying that the Cuban government should be, quote, "concerned at least." Additionally, I'll say it's worth mentioning that Trump has threatened to take action in the Middle East as well. And specifically there, he exchanged threats with top Iranian officials over the way that the government's handling protests about the plummet in the local currency, saying that if Iran violently kills peaceful protesters, that the U.S. will come to their rescue. Though with that, we are seeing reports of dead there, so we'll see if Trump does something with that. But then finally, that brings us to Mexico, with Trump telling Fox and Friends on Saturday morning, something's going to have to be done with Mexico, and saying that Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum is allowing the drug cartels to run the country.
She's very frightened of the cartels. They're running Mexico, and I've asked her numerous times, "Would you like us to take out the cartels?" "No, no, no, Mr. President. No, 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 please." So we have to do something.
There's something of note here. Most of the countries that we've talked about, they've denounced the operation in Venezuela and the abduction of Maduro, with officials from Mexico, Cuba, and Colombia all arguing that Latin America and the Caribbean are peaceful, and describing the U.S.'s involvement with Venezuela as, quote, "cowardly, criminal, and treacherous." Also, here at home, we've seen many Democrats and some Republicans in Congress outright condemning the operation. Some, like Senator Tim Kaine, looking to force votes on preventing what Chuck Schumer called a humanitarian geopolitical disaster. But, with all that said, one of the big key things here is that none of this is over. This is just the start. And I say that to everyone, not just the people who are doing like a George Bush cosplay on that aircraft carrier with a mission accomplished banner. We're gonna have to keep our eyes on this for the coming days, weeks, months, and maybe even years, especially because it seems like we're hearing very, very different things from Donald Trump and Marco Rubio at times. But for now, with all this, I'd love to know your thoughts, your reactions, and maybe even some of your predictions. I mean, what a way to start the new year. And I've got more for you in just a minute, but first let me say, if you're running your business, it feels like you're playing whack-a-mole with deadlines, you need today's sponsor, Odoo, the all-in-one business software that stops the chaos before it whacks you. You see, Odoo, it gives you a full suite of integrated apps, CRM, sales, inventory, project management, accounting, all talking to each other like adults for once. Less chaos, more control. And no tab hopping through a dozen tools. Odoo keeps everything in one clean, customizable dashboard. Send quotes and clicks, drag and drop your pipeline, use predictive lead scoring, and close deals faster with built-in e-signatures. Right, and never run out of stock again. Odoo can automatically trigger purchase orders, replenish inventory, and follow up with vendors so you don't have to. In their MRP system, it covers planning, scheduling, quality checks, shop floor management, basically everything except running the factory for you. Right, and Odoo auto-creates invoices, uses tools to read receipts with 98% accuracy, and integrates with 28,000 plus banks. I mean, yeah. And only pay for what you need. Pick the apps that you want, leave the rest, no bloated software graveyard. So hey, dive in and try Odoo's full suite free for 14 days, no credit card, and even get one app free forever, like emotional support software. So if you're ready to run your business like someone who isn't held together by caffeine and panic, hit that link and start your free Odoo trial today. New year, new ERP, better business. But then getting back into the news, as everything's been going down with Venezuela, we heard from a voice that's really huge on the left right now, and that is Zoran Mamdani. Because the new mayor of New York City was officially sworn in on Thursday, and it only took 2 days before he had his first public clash with Donald Trump as mayor.
I called the president and spoke with him directly to register my opposition to this act and to make clear that it was an opposition based on being opposed to a pursuit of regime change, to the violation of federal and international law, and a desire to see that be consistent each and every day.
Well, many on the right were very critical of that. Their clash with him, it really started the moment that he was sworn in, right? Because in his inauguration speech, he explicitly promised to govern expansively and audaciously as a democratic socialist. And it appeared that it was this line in particular that really triggered conservatives.
We will draw this city closer together. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. If our campaign demonstrated that the people of New York yearn for solidarity, then let this government foster it.
With many on the right interpreting or saying they interpreted that the warmth of collectivism, it was really just an open announcement that it was some sort of Stalinism that was about to be imposed on New York City. There you had the mayor's defenders being like, no, the word that you're thinking of is collectivization. Right? Collectivism is a general idea that focuses more on the group or community than on an individual. And with that, they argue that if anything, this puts him more in line with FDR and MLK, not Joseph Stalin. So some have also speculated that he used that term specifically to provoke a hysterical meltdown from the right, kind of a Trump political playbook move. Though really, I'll say with that, if you took a quick glance at the cesspool that is social media, he really didn't need to do anything to get that sort of reaction. But for some, just him existing as a Muslim, that was enough to just cause a fear of imminent Islamic takeover. With, for example, Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville proclaiming the enemy is inside the gates, as well as Trump advisor and actively melting candle Laura Loomer just losing her mind, posting, "This is 100% an homage to Hamas and the globalized the Intifada movement." He is signaling the beginning of his Islamic conquest from a tunnel. And adding, it was not only an homage to Hamas, but it's also an homage to our first Muslim president who was also born in Africa, Barack Hussein Obama. Though to be clear, in putting her Obama derangement syndrome aside, the tunnel that Mamdani was inside of when he got sworn in is a historic decommissioned subway station that's beneath City Hall that's known for its gorgeous architecture. And in fact, you had Mamdani telling Streets Blog NYC that it was a physical monument to a city that dared to be both beautiful and build great things that would transform working people's lives. But still, you had Loomer and the like continuing her fear-mongering, boosting nonsense about an Islamic fifth column led by the Muslim Brotherhood that's executing a long-term plan to take control of Congress, and even going as far as to say it should be illegal for Muslims to hold office in America. But, putting the screeing of some bigots aside, we should also talk about what he's actually done so far as mayor. Right in there, we'll start with his executive orders, which have been described as kind of a bit of a thorny trap, because you see Eric Adams, he signed a bunch of them on his way out, and on his first day, Mamdani could either reaffirm them, revise them, or rescind them. Mamdani, he went with option number 3, though I will say with one little caveat. Mamdani rescinded every orders that Adams made after September of 2024, the month that the former mayor was indicted on federal corruption charges.
It was a day at which many New Yorkers started to doubt, even more than they did, the motivations behind any executive order or executive action that was going to be taken.
And that did a number of things. It eliminated the Office of Rodent Mitigation, it deleted the crypto office, and removed federal immigration officials' access to the Rikers Island jail complex. But easily, the 2 orders that got the most attention concerned Israel. One codified a controversial definition of anti-Semitism proposed by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and the other, it banned city agencies from boycotting Israel. With Mamdani rescinding both of those, and saying that the IHRA's definition conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism and reaffirming his longstanding support for the BDS movement. A move that sparked a fair bit of blowback with the Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Committee, and the United Jewish Appeal Federation of New York issuing a joint statement saying, singling out Israel for sanctions is not the way to make Jewish New Yorkers feel included and safe, and it will undermine any words to that effect. But then also the Israeli Foreign Ministry jumping in to say on his very first day as New York City mayor, Mamdani shows his true face. This isn't leadership, it's anti-Semitic gasoline on an open fire. But the Mamdani camp, they predicted that there was going to be this kind of reaction, and they had a few different responses. First of all, Mamdani was always clear that his intention was to rescind these orders. He didn't reveal some hidden agenda on day one. Second, he actually kept Adams's order establishing the Office to Combat Anti-Semitism, and he promised to increase funding for the office for the prevention of hate crimes. And third, it was widely seen that Adams was clearly signing these orders last summer as a way to plant landmines that Mamdani would have no choice but to step on as soon as he entered office. Right, but then with all that said, let's talk about Mamdani jumping into his policy agenda, starting with housing. Because yesterday he named the woman who's going to head the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, Dina Levy. Right, and Levy, she was once an assistant to the state attorney general, and she just served as senior vice president at the state's housing agency, where she oversaw development of single-family and manufactured homes and ran the state's mortgage agency. But really, to many New York City renters, she's best known as a fearsome tenant rights activist. In fact, the apartment complex where Mamdani announced her appointment was infamously neglected by its private landlord back in 2008. But Levy, she helped organize its residents to secure a $5.6 million loan from the same agency that she's about to lead and sell the building to new owners who renovated it.
Dina will no longer be petitioning HPD from the outside. She will now be leading it from the inside, delivering the kind of change that can transform lives.
And so now Levy is going to be heading his effort to build 200,000 new affordable housing units over the next decade. And to that end, Mamdani created one task force that'll identify city-owned land for housing by July, and another that'll identify and remove barriers like permitting that slow down building projects. Also, Mamdani's administration will hold so-called rental rip-off hearings where tenants can come voice any and all housing-related grievances that they have.
We will hold these rental rip-off hearings across all 5 boroughs within the first 100 days of this administration. I want these hearings to expose the ugly underbelly of our city. The rats that scurry through hallways, the children that shiver in their beds in the dead of winter because the heat is off, the fees imposed on pregnant mothers because of the fear that their babies may be too loud, homes where you can peel flimsy tiles off the walls, homes where the pipes drip and rust, homes where roaches scuttle across the floor. I want New Yorkers who have long been ignored by their landlords to finally be heard by our city government.
And then, based on those hearings, his administration will draft a report to guide his housing policies. Also, as for his big campaign promises, he's still planning to push for a rent freeze on nearly 1 million rent-stabilized apartments. Though I will say that may prove difficult since Adams appointed new members to the Rent Guidelines Board last year to hamstring Mamdani's efforts. Regardless of that, you have Mamdani insisting that he'll be able to pressure them into action. Then next up, Mamdani wants to make buses free, which would require support from state lawmakers and cost somewhere around $800 million per year. And then finally, he wants to provide free universal childcare, and he promised that one way or another, all 3 of these policies will be in place by the time his first term ends. So we're ultimately in this position where it feels like everyone is holding their breath, supporters and critics alike, to see whether Mamdani can actually defy gravity in New York or if he'll inevitably fall back to earth like past idealistic mayors. And then there's more you need to know, more we need to dive into in just a minute. But first, let me take a second to sponsor myself, because right now over at beautifulbastard.com, we are restocked with our signature collection and revamped prints. Right over the break, we were working with our manufacturers not only to make sure that, the shirts and the hoodies, they were top notch, but also that the prints on them were even better. Really vibrant, longer lasting, even when you don't follow the washing instructions like I don't. And so right now you can snag our new Thriving gear. For me, it's a sarcastic wear, along with our emotionally exhausted line, God is testing me and I refuse to study, a silly goose in this economy, and even more. And to celebrate the new year, our first week back, if you use coupon code 2026 at checkout, you'll get 26% off. All, of course, at beautifulbastard.com. But then, getting back to the news, right, more news you need to know. A Paris court is handing out jail time to people who falsely claim that France's First Lady was a man. Right, 10 people were just found guilty of cyberbullying Brigitte Macron, with one landing a 6-month jail sentence, several others getting suspended sentences up to 8 months, and 5 being temporarily banned from using Twitter. Also, everyone's gonna have to pay fines and attend online harassment courses, though I will say there was one defendant who notably apologized who was spared from jail time. And again, all this is tied to the big right-wing conspiracy that Brigitte was actually born a man. And the 10 people who were convicted here, they spread that conspiracy theory online, and they also accused her of being a pedophile due to the 24-year age gap between her and President Emmanuel Macron. And while 3 were tried in absentia, the 7 who did face trial in person, they denied wrongdoing and insisted that the posts were either satire or part of a legitimate debate. But the court, it did not see it that way, calling the comments degrading, insulting, and malicious. All while Brigitte has repeatedly pushed back on these claims, and yesterday she told French media that she launched these legal proceedings to set an example in fighting against online harassment. And with that, notably, that is not where the Macron's legal action ends. Because one of the reasons most of us are even aware of this conspiracy is because it's been amplified by Candace Owens. And Owens, right, she's facing a defamation lawsuit from the Macrons. But that suit has in no way stopped Candace from continuing to make those claims. And she, in fact, responded to today's news by calling Brigitte dangerous, suggesting she did sinister stuff in the military, and saying she wakes up every day, puts on a fake wig, lipstick, and mascara, and declares war on those who know his true identity. Where to these claims, these conspiracy theories, they're obviously not going to go anywhere. But we live in a time where there's major distrust of major institutions, politicians, even the news media. And while skepticism and distrust, it can be very important, this is also one of the other ways things can play out. And to that point, while it might seem strange and random to accuse the French First Lady of being trans, she is by no means the only or even first one, right? People have been saying this about Michelle Obama in the past, plenty of other people in power, specifically women often get transvestigated. But as far as this specific case and how it's going to play out and how maybe it continues in the moral court of opinion, you had at least one of those people convicted planning on appealing the ruling. And with that, saying this shows just how far French society is drifting toward less freedom of speech, saying freedom of speech no longer exists. So that is, of course, others have said they're just fucking around and finding out, saying they pushed false claims, they harassed, and so they were held accountable. But then also, next up to date, this is crazy. Elon Musk's AI, Grok, it's taking images of people and undressing them regardless of whether they consented or were even minors, right? And that's the new meta on X right now, right? If you go to almost any image on X, especially of women, you'll see replies like, hey Grok, make her wear a transparent bikini. It didn't matter if it was some random person or Swedish Deputy Prime Minister Ebba Busch after users asked Grok to make images of her in a bikini, which it did. Or take, for example, Julia Yukari, who was a Brazilian musician. She posted this image with her cat, and her replies were just flooded with people making requests. But then Yukari, obviously not happy about it, and her indignation was enough to actually make some waves, and it led to X and Grok to take action. You started seeing accounts that requested content having their posts deleted, and Grok saying, hey, I understand the indignation. There was a failure in Grok's safeguards that allowed improper manipulations of images, as in the case of Julia Yukari. This was quickly fixed, and I don't generate or share explicit content. Sources, G1 and BBC confirm the incident and the resolution. You know, that reply, which was made this morning, it makes it seem like Grok won't share or generate explicit content anymore. However, posts from this morning show that it's still happening in at least some of the cases of both users requesting it for images of themselves and of others requesting it. Also, notably, bikinis and lingerie, it was kind of just the tip of the iceberg. A lot of people trying to game the system by requesting things like covering the subjects in clear tape in order to show more. And, you know, while making non-consensual lewd and sexual images of adults is bad enough, where you saw a lot of people speaking up is when it started involving children. Now, obviously, I'm not going to show anything here, but actress Nell Fisher, who plays Holly in the last season of Stranger Things, she was on the receiving end of this in particular. Everything from lewd images to even creeps having Grok putting her on the laps for a kiss were being made, with then the backlash getting so big that Elon Musk had to chime in saying, anyone using Grok to make illegal content will suffer the same consequences as if they upload illegal content. With then angry users pointing out that this response avoids any culpability on X's part, despite its tool being the one actually generating the content. And one of the big things is that Musk's response is unlikely going to calm regulators such as Ofcom in the UK, which wrote this morning, we have made urgent contact with X and XAI to understand what steps they've taken to comply with their legal duties to protect users in the UK. Based on their response, we will undertake a swift assessment to determine whether there are potential compliance issues that warrant investigation. But legal repercussions or not, this whole situation, it's led to many women really considering what they post on the platform. Some taking down images of themselves doing innocent things like just going to Disneyland. Others are understandably leaving the platform outside of official announcements, in which case they're limiting their replies. Though also with this, you had people noting that not every AI-generated image by Grok was unconsensual or crossed a sexual line. Right? In many cases, the people requesting the images were those depicted, often as a form of promotion for their OnlyFans. In other cases, you had people making silly or dumb requests, like when Musk had Grok add his face to this image, or things like dressing Bush in a burqa since she was pushing for a burqa ban. But, you know, ultimately, for many, this is kind of a wake-up call that, like it or not, legal or not, this type of AI content, it is here and increasingly realistic and easy to use use. And at a time when you're seeing many governments pulling back the guardrails, pulling back or holding back regulation, because many of them have a fear of falling behind in the AI race, you have many wondering, is it worth posting anything if people can just do this? And with that, I'd love to know your thoughts, opinions, and reactions in those comments. But that, my friends, you beautiful bastards, is where today's Philip DeFranco show is gonna end. Thank you for watching. It feels good to be back here to dive through all of this together with you. And of course, I'll see you right back here tomorrow for another Philip DeFranco show. There's even more just a click away if you'd like.
Cuba is being run by senile old men with a collapsing economy.
Said that right with Trump right behind him.
Right behind him. He bombed Nigeria over Christmas.
The United States runs Venezuela now?
Rubio, we should maybe call him like the resource rapist. Is that too much? Do we need to edit that one out?
No, well, we're not going to edit this thing.